When I pressed the button on the remote and watched my entire treehouse slowly detach from the oak and roll down the hill, I heard Karen screaming from the top deck, clutching a mimosa. In that moment, two things became clear to me. First, this was going to be the most satisfying Tuesday I'd ever had. Second, I should have done this weeks ago right after she called the cops on my swing set. You'd think someone who trespassed into another person's private treehouse to throw a full-on lavender-themed brunch would at least ask permission first. But Karen didn't just take over my treehouse, she claimed it like a pirate planting a flag on new land. She changed the locks, hung up macrame copyright wall art, and announced to the hoe that it would now serve as the neighborhood's official meditation hut. She even gave a speech about communal harmony while sipping cucumber water on my hammock. What she didn't realize was that this treehouse wasn't just wood and rope. It sat on a retractable steel chassis equipped with solar panels, satellite internet, and GPS-controlled wheels. And I had the remote. This all started 3 months ago, when I finished building what I called my engineering masterpiece. I had recently left a job designing modular housing units and decided to test one of my mobile eco-retreat models on my own land. This wasn't just about getting away from city noise, it was personal. For years, I had dreamed of a design that combined mobility with off-grid living. My treehouse stood tall but sleek, nestled in the corner of my wooded property and built into the trunk of a massive oak. From the outside, it looked like a luxury rustic getaway. Inside, it featured smart lighting, a water purification system, and a multi-level platform with a hydraulic lift that could raise or lower the floors. Every inch was engineered with care. Unfortunately, that care was put to the test the day Karen spotted it from her second-floor balcony. The first complaint came as a typed letter with gold foil edges slid under my gate like some kind of royal decree. Karen, self-appointed hoe president, claimed my vertical structure threatened neighborhood property values and violated her personal sense of visual peace. She even said it blocked moonlight from reaching her backyard fountain. I laughed it off at first. Then the fines started appearing in unofficial ones, of course, notes taped to my door demanding fees for an unauthorized aerial structure costing $250. I ignored them, knowing the hoe had no real authority over my property line. That didn't sit well with Karen. Her campaign escalated like a terrible sequel. She hosted community meetings about my treehouse and tried to file noise complaints about wind chimes I didn't even own. Then came the weekend I went camping. When I returned Sunday afternoon, my front gate was wide open, and the treehouse looked different. From afar, I saw white curtains fluttering in the breeze, string lights twinkling on the deck, and a yoga mat rolled out in the main room. Puzzled, I walked up the hill and froze. Inside, a group of people in yoga pants lounged on my furniture as if it were a spa retreat. Karen, dressed in a pink tracksuit and oversized sunglasses, stood near the kitchenette, arranging a cheese board. "Namaste," she greeted me, like I was attending some welcome party. When I asked what was going on, she tilted her head and said, "We've appropriated this space for community healing." It was too beautiful to remain private. I was too stunned to respond, too stunned until she added, "Don't worry, we brought our own crystals." Apparently, Karen had broken in using a ladder, disabled the smart lock with a kitchen knife, and claimed squatters' rights based on some landscaping brochure clause she completely misunderstood. She even posted on the neighborhood message board that the treehouse was now open to all spiritually aligned home members. One woman was burning sage in my reading nook. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten, I just smiled, backed away slowly, and headed down to my truck. Hidden under the driver's seat was the silver briefcase holding the remote, a matte black device with a fingerprint sensor and buttons, connected via a private server to the backup battery bank in the treehouse foundation. I flipped open the protective cover, pressed the activation button, and waited. A soft mechanical hum vibrated through the trees. From the hilltop, I watched the structure shudder and then start rolling. The treehouse sat on a reinforced carbon fiber chassis with 4 oversized all-terrain wheels, each powered by a whisper-quiet electric motor. The entire platform slowly descended from the branches like an old-fashioned elevator. Normally, it took about a minute, but that moment felt endless as Karen and her brunch guests erupted into confused screams. One woman dropped her fruit parfait, Another clung desperately to a hanging plant like it was her lifeline. Karen shouted something about calling the sheriff. I pressed another button, and the treehouse began to roll forward, cautiously at first like a parade float on a slow march. But once it cleared the hill, the wheels found traction and it picked up speed, following a GPS route I had programmed years ago for test runs. The path wound through my backwoods trail, crossed a narrow footbridge, and led into the forest buffer zone bordering county land. I monitored everything from my app. Internal cameras showed Karen flailing as her yoga mat slid around the floor. One of the speakers connected to the house's sound system started playing nature sounds, a birdsong and a babbling brook. It was perfect. From a safe distance, I watched the treehouse carry Karen and her unwilling guests deeper into the woods. They were Safia. There were emergency stop features, cushioned interiors, and a fully stocked fridge. None of it mattered to Karen though. She was trapped inside the very place she had seized, now being controlled remotely by the man she tried to push out. It was the most poetic revenge I'd ever engineered. What happened next flipped my quiet life upside down. Karen's husband called the police. News crews arrived. Lawsuits followed, along with camera crews, audits, and internet infamy. But right then, leaning against my truck and watching a woman who tried to steal my dream retreat being chauffeured deep into the forest by the taxi Makita, I felt something else. Peace, real, undisturbed, karmic peace. And it had wheels. The treehouse rolled deeper into the woods at a slow, almost majestic pace, its solar-charged wheels softly crunching leaves and pine needles. Inside, chaos reigned. Karen panicked, desperately trying to open the doors locked from the inside by default safety protocols. Her guests, a yoga instructor, 2 HO board members, and a woman named Marlene who had just come for Tia, were all yelling over one another. Where are we going? Is this legal? Are we being kidnapped? Karen, ever the ringleader of nonsense, grabbed one of my throw pillows like it was a military radio and started shouting into it, hoping it could contact the outside world. When that failed, she tried kicking the sliding glass door but it didn't budge. I designed it to withstand wildlife and 100-mile-per-hour winds. Not even a squirrel could break in, and neither could Karen's flats. Meanwhile, I was parked in my driveway with a bag of popcorn, watching the whole thing unfold through the treehouse's internal cameras on my laptop. Each camera feed was labeled a kitchen, deck, reading loft, bathroom, hallway, giving me a front row seat to the meltdown. I could hear Karen screaming about lawsuits and demanding someone find the break. I chuckled as she stormed into the kitchenette and opened a drawer labeled emergency. Inside were protein bars, thermal blankets, and a laminated evacuation guide. No remote, no override button. She stared at it like it was written in alien code, then crumpled it up and declared the document unconstitutional. The treehouse remained unbothered. It reached the end of the gravel trail and smoothly transitioned onto a wide dirt path I had reinforced years ago. What Karen didn't know was that the entire route was meticulously mapped and tested. It had stop points, backup power, and a silent alarm that pinged me if anything went wrong. From the outside, it looked like a panic-inducing disaster. From the inside of my brain, it was a flawless demonstration of software. I tapped a button on the control panel, and the house switched to tour mode. An automatic voice played through the interior speakers. Welcome to the Arbor Escape, a state-of-the-art mobile eco-retreat. Please remain calm as we travel through Mark's private forest. Fun fact, these trees are over 70 years old and home to more than 24 native bird species. Karen looked like she might explode. Back in the neighborhood, things were heating up. Karen's husband Todd, who always seemed like he was one panic attack away from vanishing, was frantically dialing 911. Yes, officer, my wife is trapped in a runaway treehouse. No, it's not a metaphor. No. By the time the dispatcher finally connected Todd to someone who might actually take the call seriously, he'd already rallied 2 other home members. They stood on the curb with binoculars and a folding chair, watching the spectacle unfold. Across the street, my neighbor Phil pulled out his drone, launching it into the sky with a laugh as he maneuvered it toward the treetops to capture footage. Word spread fast. Before long, half the block was live-streaming Todd's meltdown and the treehouse's slow, deliberate retreat into the woods. Then came the moment I'd secretly hoped for. A local news van showed up after picking up scanner chatter about a mobile home kidnapping. The reporter, a young guy desperate to make a name for himself, stood at the gate and delivered a dramatic intro. Breaking news here at West Pinewoods Estates, where a neighborhood dispute has escalated into what some are calling a rolling hostage situation featuring a remote-controlled treehouse. The man behind it, a reclusive engineer turned apparent prankster, and the victim, the Ho president known only as Karen. He didn't even bother hiding the smirk when he said her name. Inside the treehouse, Karen was trying to climb onto the reading loft to wave out of a skylight. Marlene, clutching a soy latte and clearly regretting her friendship choices, sat in the corner quietly muttering prayers. The yoga instructor attempted to calm everyone by leading a breathing exercise, but as the deck tilted slightly uphill along the path, panic erupted again. I watched Karen grab a curtain rod to steady herself only for it to snap off dramatically, sending her sprawling into a bin bag. Her startled yelp echoed through my speakers like music. The treehouse slowed to a stop near a clearing, a small wooden platform with a built-in campfire pit, one of my favorite spots on the trail. Solar lights glowed softly, and a wind chime sang gently in the breeze. I activated the pause and enjoy mode, and the voice returned. "You have reached Vista Point. Please take a moment to enjoy nature. Did you know raccoons can open over 30 types of containers?" Karen bellowed something about raccoons not being her current concern. Just then, a curious raccoon wandered into the clearing and looked up at the treehouse. Marlene shrieked as the little animal sniffed near the step, caught perfectly on the inside cam. Karen grabbed a yoga mat and flung it like a frisbee in the wild attempt to scare it off. I was still laughing when my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered calmly. "Mark speaking." Then Karen's voice exploded on speaker. "Roll that treehouse back to my lawn right now, or I'll have you arrested for terrorism." I sipped my drink and let the silence hang. "Karen," I said slowly, "you broke into my treehouse, hosted a yoga brunch, and declared it community property. I'm simply escorting unauthorized guests off my land. It's an automated demo, not a crime." She growled in frustration and yelled something about the Geneva Convention, which, I'm fairly sure, doesn't cover eco-architecture. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, Todd was having a full meltdown. The reporter had coaxed him into giving a live statement, during which Todd admitted he wasn't exactly sure how Karen got inside the treehouse and maybe she was just misunderstood sometimes. The Ho's vice president, Greg, tried to distance the group from Karen entirely, saying none of them were aware of her actions and that this was between her and the tree guy. By the end of the segment, Phil's drone footage was airing on TV showing Karen wildly flailing her arms like she was stuck on a haunted amusement ride. The treehouse stayed parked at Vista Point for the next hour while I let the situation cool off. As the sky began to dim with the approach of sunset, I tapped the return route button. The structure slowly turned and started its journey back down the hill, this time taking the longer path that passed 2 more observation decks and a wildlife camera station. I could hear Karen yelling in the background, "Not again." The automated voice resumed, "As we return to base, please consider ways you can be a better neighbor. Step 1, don't steal people's tree houses." I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee as the house crept back towards civilization. When it finally emerged from the trees an hour later, the crowd at the curb erupted into cheers and laughter. People clapped, someone even whistled. Karen didn't come out immediately. When the door finally opened, she stomped out with leaves tangled in her hair and dirt smudged across her sweater, looking like a washed-up reality show contestant. Karen emerged looking like a reality show star just voted off the island. She didn't utter a word, it just marched past the news crew straight into her house, with Todd trailing behind her like a soggy sponge. I stood there smiling silently, knowing full well this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't about to go down without a fight. The war had started, and next time, I wasn't just going to roll her into the woods. I had plans, a treehouse upgrade she hadn't even seen yet. By morning, the footage had already gone viral. Every corner of the internet was buzzing with the saga of the rogue treehouse, the notorious Karen, and the man with the remote. Memes flooded neighborhood group chats and spread across Reddit faster than wildfire. One showed the treehouse photoshopped into historic moments of the moon landing, The O.J. Simpson chase. Another featured Karen's terrified face superimposed on a roller coaster with the caption, "Next stop, consequences." I barely had time to pour my coffee before the first email arrived from a national news producer wanting an interview. I ignored it for the moment. Karen, however, was far from quiet. Overnight, she transformed from suburban tyrant to full-blown martyr. She gathered what dignity she had left and held a press conference right in her front yard. Wearing a neck bracelet, yes, a neck bracelet, she stood behind a foldable podium and declared herself a victim of a premeditated attack. "I was kidnapped," she announced into the microphone, flanked by two half-hearted home members and a man holding a yoga mat like it was a protest sign. This individual, Mark, used advanced technology to detain me and my guests against our will in a moving building with no lawful authority. The only thing missing was dramatic background music. Her speech had the flair of a daytime courtroom drama. She claimed I had psychologically tortured her with automated forest sounds and robotic voices, leaving her emotionally paralyzed. Then she pivoted, blaming me for fracturing trust within the Ho community. She even demanded an investigation for domestic terrorism. The crowd of 10 looked baffled, especially when Marlene stepped forward and whispered, "Karen, we were inside a luxury treehouse with snacks. It wasn't Guantanamo." That clip alone would be played over 10 million times in 2 days. By noon, I found a letter taped to my mailbox, her attorney's cease and desist, legal jargon, demands, threats, all printed on fancy embossed paper with gold trim, like a wedding invite instead of a lawsuit. But I wasn't just some backwoods inventor. I had receipts, both literal and legal, blueprints, surveillance footage from the internal cameras, GPS logs, and most importantly, a detailed county report filed months earlier confirming the structure was private and fully permitted. Karen hadn't trespassed on some vague property line. She'd entered a locked, engineered structure with more documentation than her entire Ho board combined. That's when I made my move. I called my cousin Sheila, an environmental lawyer with a firecracker personality and zero tolerance for fools. Sheila looked at the footage and said, "Oh, this is better than reality TV, we're going on offense." Within 24 hours, she filed a countersuit claiming illegal trespassing, property damage, attempted squatting, and defamation. The best part? We attached a USB drive packed with video clips from the internal cameras, Karen posing on my hammock like royalty, ordering people around in my kitchen, and throwing a yoga mat at a raccoon. We didn't just build a legal chassis, we created a cinematic experience. That's when the media really dug in. Local news turned national. A primetime host dubbed it the Great Treehouse Heist. Reddit crowned me their new folk hero, a remote control Mark. Karen, unfortunately for her, became mobile menace Karen. TikTok creators reenacted the whole saga with Lego sets and Barbie dolls. One YouTuber did a full-length dramatic reading of her press conference, set to orchestral music. The momentum was unstoppable, and Karen was spiraling. Her next big mistake, going live on Facebook. She fired up her phone, selfie mode on, face tight with rage, and launched into an unhinged monologue that her Facebook rant kicked off with, "I don't care what the internet thinks," and ended with threats about starting her own neighborhood militia to patrol property lines. In between, she made bizarre claims about treehouse surveillance, electromagnetic harassment, and something wild about pine cones being government microphones. It was clear she lost control of the narrative via and maybe a few other things besides. Then the auditors arrived. Once the county caught wind of her antics and saw how publicly she was dragging the Ho's reputation through the mud, they started digging. Permits, budgets, spending records, everything was suddenly under a microscope. And guess what surfaced? Her gazebo, that ornate eyesore in her backyard with marble pillars and fairy lights strung up like Versailles, built without proper approval, violating setback rules, and mysteriously paid for out of the Ho's landscaping fund. Suddenly, those who once followed her orders scrambled to distance themselves. The Ho vice president resigned, 2 treasurers claimed ignorance, and the new interim board voted to suspend her from all official duties pending investigation. Her kingdom was crumbling. The cherry on top, the city inspector showed up at my gate. I braced for a showdown. Instead, he stepped out of his truck, clipboard in hand, and said, "So this is the famous Treehouse, Huh? Mind if I take a look? He climbed the stairs, poked around for 15 minutes, then asked if I'd ever considered building a similar model for public use. I gave him the full tour, explained the specs, and demonstrated the hydraulic platform. When I finished, he whistled and said, "You know, my daughter's birthday's coming up. Ever thought of licensing this design?" That's when it hit me. Karen had done more than try to steal my sanctuary. She'd accidentally launched my business into orbit. By week's end, I had offers from 2 venture firms, an email from an outdoor travel company, and a DM from a Netflix scout. Meanwhile, Karen was last spotted arguing with a grocery store cashier about whether pineapples counted as a taxable luxury. Her hoe badge had been confiscated, her gazebo was under a demolition order, and her once loyal followers now referred to her as that Treehouse lady, with visible embarrassment. But even in the chaos, I knew she wasn't done. Karen wasn't the type to fade quietly into a cautionary tale. No, she was wounded, and people like her don't reflect, they reload. That's why I double-checked the Treehouse security, updated the remote firmware, strengthened camera encryption, and installed a motion-triggered foghorn on the lower deck just in case. Because if Karen thought her biggest mistake was stealing my treehouse, she hadn't yet considered what would happen when the entire town started asking me to build Onya and not her. Her days of home rule were over, mine were just beginning. Just when I thought the saga had reached its hilarious and poetic peak, a twist unfolded that even I hadn't seen coming. While Karen was busy flinging lawsuits, press statements, and dramatic videos online, she had no idea she wasn't just messing with some guy who built a treehouse for fun. She'd been interfering with a federally funded prototype tied to a major innovation grant. That's right, my little treehouse on wheels, which she had casually broken into and hosted cucumber water brunches inside, was actually part of a government-backed initiative for sustainable off-grid housing. What Karen thought was some eccentric man's toy was, in reality, a fully registered project called ECOMO, Autonomous Living Structure Unit MALSU for short. When my phone buzzed with a reminder about the upcoming demo presentation for the Department of Innovation and Infrastructure, I nearly spit out my coffee. See, before all of this home madness started, I'd partnered with an environmental tech incubator supporting green housing startups. They'd given me a small grant to develop a mobile shelter capable of autonomous off-grid living for disaster-prone areas. The treehouse wasn't just a fancy plaything, it was designed to demonstrate how sustainable tech could be deployed quickly in hard-to-reach zones, providing functional housing without municipal utilities. The retractable wheels, solar array, water recycler, and smart sensors weren't luxury features, they were proof of concept for modular field housing. I had every inch, every detail was documented, photographed, and filed with the city as part of the registered beta site. Karen's intrusion had disrupted my timeline, but ironically, her stunt gave me exactly what I needed, a real-world test under unpredictable conditions. When I updated the innovation team about what had happened, their reaction wasn't concern, it was curiosity. They requested all the footage. Every second of Karen stumbling around inside, trying to take charge like she owned the place, became invaluable data. How did an untrained user interact with the controls? How did the structure react to chaotic movement? Did the audio narration calm or enrage the test subject? One rep even said, "This is exactly the kind of unpredictable human behavior we needed to evaluate stress scenarios." I wasn't just vindicated, I was now the centerpiece of a high-profile case study. Meanwhile, Karen was unraveling fast. The county had launched formal audits into her activities as HO president. Fake permits, misuse of HO funds, unauthorized modifications to community space, as if the evidence was piling up like a Jenga tower ready to collapse. She called one last emergency meeting in a desperate attempt to cling to power. No one showed up except a neighborhood teen who live-streamed the entire speech and whispering snarky commentary behind the camera. At one point, Karen declared that my treehouse was a state scam, and the live-stream chat exploded with laughing emojis. She didn't know it yet, but her downfall had gone viral worldwide. A clip of her holding a crystal and ranting about solar espionage had been dubbed into multiple languages and posted on a global meme account. Her HO throne had been pulled out from under her, and I, the once mocked recluse at the edge of the cul-de-sac, had become the unofficial community legend. My inbox overflowed with invitations to speak at innovation conferences, requests for interviews, licensing offers. A reality show producer even pitched a series called Off-Grid Genius where I'd travel around solving neighborhood disputes with my gadgets. I declined the show, but the offers kept rolling in. Meanwhile, I started working with a legal team to fully patent the Malsa Treehouse design. The name Karen had tried to drag through the mud was now on legal documents, trade publications, and even fan merchandise. But the real kicker, the thing that truly sealed her fate, was the money. When I announced a 7-figure licensing deal with a wilderness retreat company to build 10 custom mobile tree houses based on my design, the whole neighborhood practically threw a block party. One neighbor even sent me a bouquet with a card that read, "Thanks for turning her tantrum into a TED Talk." I laughed, not because of the money, but because the very thing she despised, the structure she tried to claim and control, had become the reason she was now being investigated for fraud. If she'd left it alone, it might have quietly faded into prototype obscurity. But she had to escalate it. She turned it into a movement. Then the city sent another inspector not to evaluate the treehouse, but to begin formal condemnation proceedings against Karen's illegal gazebo, that marble monstrosity in her yard, built on a protected easement. When workers arrived to take it down, she appeared outside in full regalia, a robe, slippers, and a plastic tiara, yelling that they were trespassing on sacred hoe ground. They gave her 5 minutes to collect her personal belongings before demolition began. She used that time to take selfies and post a farewell tribute on Facebook titled "Goodbye to My Garden Throne." It got 3 likes and 1 laughing reaction from someone named Donna. As her influence vanished, Karen grew more erratic. She left passive-aggressive notes in mailboxes, tried to run for Hoe office under the new title Community Morality Director, and even called a local AM radio station claiming she was targeted by a shadowy builders conspiracy. But no one was listening anymore. The neighbors she once bullied now waved warmly and brought baked goods. The same people who once feared her clipboard now offered to help clean my trail or paint the new treehouse deck. It was surreal but satisfying. I installed new upgrades as part of the commercial rollout. The beta unit of my original was retrofitted with a retractable security gate, an anti-intrusion alarm that blasted accordion music at full volume, and a pop-up turret suddenly deployed an inflatable sign that read "Private property, stay back." It was part deterrent, part performance art, maybe a little dramatic, but after everything, I felt it was well earned. Karen, meanwhile, had vanished from sight. Rumor had it she was trying to start a rival hoe down the street, recruiting anyone who would listen. So far, her only members were a confused elderly man and a cat. She still wore her tiara at the grocery store. She still ran into anyone who made eye contact a little too long. But now, she was more of a punchline, a living cautionary tale about hubris and hammock obsession. I had gone from the weird guy with a treehouse to the neighborhood's resident innovator. And all it took was one wildly entitled woman, one bad decision, and one very powerful remote. But I knew better than to assume she was gone for good. People like Karen don't admit defeat, they smolder, regroup, and wait for the right moment. Something deep down told me she wasn't finished. Not yet. The only question was how far she'd go next time, and whether she was ready for Treehouse 2.0. Because now, the structure she once tried to claim wasn't just my sanctuary. It was a fortress, a business, a symbol. And if she ever dared trespass again, I had a whole new set of surprises waiting just behind the solar panels. It began with a subtle crunch of gravel in the dead of night, the kind of sound that makes you glance toward a window without even realizing why. I was inside the treehouse, working on new schematics for the off-grid version 2.0, when I heard it, barely audible, like footsteps trying not to be footsteps. I muted the music and listened. Another sound, a metal clicking softly against wood. I knew that sound well. The hatch handle on the lower deck was being tampered with, and there was only one person arrogant, reckless, and petty enough to try climbing into my now world-famous treehouse in the middle of the night. Karen was back. Part of me expected it. Her fall had been too loud, too dramatic, and too incomplete to be final. Her whole empire was gone, her reputation buried beneath memes and audits, and her neighborhood allies long gone. But Karen wasn't the type to retreat. She kept grudges like treasured heirlooms. And now, apparently, she'd decided that if she couldn't control the treehouse legally, she'd just storm it like a rogue crusader. I tapped a button on my phone and pulled up the security camera feed. There she was, wearing black leggings, a rhinestone-studded hoodie, and shoes entirely unsuited for stealth. She carried a duffel bag and was struggling to attach a cheap rope ladder to the deck railing. I blinked in disbelief. She managed to get one foot on the first rung before it collapsed under her weight. The camera caught her landing in the bushes with a muffled thump, followed by whispered curses and a muttered complaint about the ladder being defective. I watched her get up, brush off twigs, and then circle the tree like she was searching for a cheat code. I could have ended it right then. It triggered floodlights, set off alarms, but something made me want to see how far she'd go, what her endgame really was. So I waited. After several failed attempts and a loud argument with the mosquito, she finally climbed the back utility stairway, and unaware it triggered a silent alert. I watched as she slowly cracked open the deck door, flashlight clenched between her teeth, and slipped inside. She was in. She made it. For about 30 seconds, she strutted like she'd conquered a kingdom, arms folded. She paced like a villain delivering a TED talk to ghosts. Mine again, she whispered, shining her light on my carefully arranged tools, the loft, and the updated control panel. She didn't realize the cameras were watching her from every angle, or that I was watching her. Then came the moment she tried to plug in her phone for a hammock selfie again. The instant her fingers touched the outlet, I triggered the internal deterrent protocol. A booming voice filled the treehouse, pre-recorded in my own voice. Unauthorized access detected. Please exit the premises. You have 10 seconds to comply. Karen dropped her phone and screamed. She scrambled backward into the kitchenette, knocking over a thermos of herbal tea I'd left on the counter. This is a misunderstanding," she shouted into the empty room, like someone would answer. I tapped the second button. The window sealed with automated locks. The overhead lights switched to red. The screen embedded in the main wall flickered on and played her greatest hits, brunch footage, long press conference, live stream about electromagnetic harassment. Her voice echoed through the structure as her expression shifted from smug to horrified. She tried opening the front door. It was locked tight. She ran to the loft window. It was sealed. Finally, in a last desperate move, she lunged for the main control panel, smashing buttons at random. That's when I triggered the final trick. A low mechanical hum filled the air, the wheels unlocked, and the treehouse began to move slowly, majestically, gliding right off the platform and down the trail, just like before. Karen let out a noise that could only be described as a wounded bagpipe. I stood on the hill, arms crossed, watching it disappear into the darkness like a high-tech ghost ship. This time, I hadn't packed snacks. There were no guests, just Karen, alone with her own absurd reckoning, heading into the forest. I took a slow breath and followed at a distance in my truck, watching the treehouse pause at Vista Point again, where it softly played the same calming audio from before. Breathe in peace, breathe out entitlement. But unlike last time, she didn't panic or scream. She just sat in the middle of the deck, defeated, clutching her duffel bag and gently swaying. Something inside her had cracked, or maybe she was finally starting to realize she couldn't win this. No matter how many times she tried to control the story, reality and technology were far better at telling the truth. By morning, I drove out and manually guided the treehouse back along the trail, while Karen slumped against the kitchenette counter like the worst Airbnb guest ever. When I parked it back in place, I opened the deck door and looked at her for a long moment. She said nothing, just stared at me, eyes bloodshot, hair a mess, and whispered, "I just wanted things to go back to how they were." I almost felt bought a broken bar, almost. Then she added, "Before you moved in with your circus machine." That was enough to close the door again. I called her sister, who lived in the next town and had apparently been waiting for a call like this. She came, wordless, barely making eye contact as she loaded Karen into the back seat. I watched them drive away finally, mercifully quietly. No screams, no lawsuits, no dramatic goodbyes, just silence. In the days that followed, something strange happened. Peace returned. No more random violation notices pinned to my gate. No more flyers demanding mandatory lawn color schemes. The Ho, now restructured with decent people, invited me to give a talk at the community center about sustainable living. I declined it but offered to build them a stationary garden shed version of the treehouse for free, as a goodwill gesture. They accepted with such enthusiasm it nearly startled me. Neighbors began stopping by more often, waving and asking questions about the tech. One family even asked if they could book a weekend stay in one of my future models when I opened them to the public. The once tense neighborhood had evolved, and oddly enough, Karen had been the catalyst. Not because of her vision, but because of her mistakes. The final touch came a week later. A handwritten letter, sloppy and carefully unfolded, sat on my workshop table. It simply read, "I was wrong, don't think I'll say it twice, Karen." No threats, no blame, just a begrudging concession, scrawled in half-hearted ink. I stared at it for a while, then tucked it away in the top drawer right under the original treehouse blueprint. Karen never came back. Not physically, anyway. Her legacy lingered in jokes, in neighborhood lore, in warning tales passed to new residents. But she'd finally learned what I'd known all along. You can take over a lawn, a committee, even a treehouse if you're bold enough. But if you don't understand the roots beneath it all, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing rolls away. Literally.